King of Asante, home and abroad. Thank you. And now, Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, having been prepared in mind and in heart, let us receive the man who built the bridge from Asante to Seychelles. Director at the Manhyia Palace Museum and Associate Director at the Wole Soyinka Foundation, I give to you a son of Asante man, Professor Ivan Agyemang Duah.
The eminent linguist of Asante Court, Bafo Osayakoto, recounted in a 1998 conversation how Asante man received Nana Agyemang Prempeh I and his returning exile party at the Kumasi railway station. Bafo Akoto was a teenager at the time, and his father had preempted a scenario of a reception and an unfolding sense of history that will be remembered. It was more than that, though, indeed, an epiphany in reconciliation. And that was how father and son ended up with a mail-in crowd on November 12, 1924. The youth of Bafo Akoto's time knew of the tragic circumstances of Prempeh's exile, the 27-year alienation that Nelson Mandela would eventually share with him in African history. In 1897, Prempeh was aware of the imminent danger, or worse, end of his reign. The deportation orders that had been made by the British military were followed by the marching orders from Kumasi to Elmina. Yet, about 500 anti-colonial Ashanti activists and courtiers decided to travel with him up to Elmina before his final voyage to the Indian Ocean. If the tragic hero and bearer of history was at last returning, the right courtesies were to be given. Voyage from Seychelles was 2 months long, from the harbor city of Bombay, or what is now modern-day Mumbai, in India, through the port of Sudan, which is between Eastern and Central Africa, up north to Port Said in Egypt, still within the Red Sea, or the Eastern Arab world. It was from there that they sailed to Europe, first to Liverpool in England, and further across into the ancient port city of Marseille in southern France, and onwards to the British peninsula of Gibraltar on the south coast of Spain. They started the journey on the SS Olympia and finally made it to the Gold Coast on the SS Agyemang. Many of the welcome party or crowd slept at the Kumasi station on the eve of return till the expected arrival of the main train from Sekondi at 6 a.m. the following day, that is November 12. Eventually, and one after the other, the 45 royal passengers, in a palpable state of anxiety, disembarked. The focus, as expected, was on Prempeh. Majority of the crowd had never met him, neither had they ever seen an image of him, which also explained why they were there in their numbers. They saw a middle-aged man in a distinguishing suit with an English hat, which went against their expectation of a cloth-wearing nobler. It was when some of the elders started screaming and singing his affiliation that the jubilation started. A number of the young royals' returnees were carried on the necks of joyous others all the way to Asafo. Among them was the 10-year-old Mary Prempeh, daughter of the returning ASANTE. The jubilation, she told me in 1999, went on till the evening as mothers looked through the crowd for their children who had gone unaccompanied. It will be a cruel expectation that Prempeh's persona will remain the same, having left as a young king at the presumed age of 26 and spending over a quarter of a century in a strange land. He was culturally adaptable to multiracial Seychelles. He took to adult literacy, especially the English language, and the most English of recreations, cricket. He and some of the chiefs were into herbal medicine and trained some Seychellois, including their leading herbalist, Charles Yako, in their medicinal garden. An anthropologist in Manhyia, J.P. Mahon, and I are still searching for a manuscript, presumably written by Prempeh, his chief herbalist, the Dominasihene or Ankasihene, Kwame Boateng, and two chiefs of the Nsumankwa, Kwame Afre and Kojo Yeboah. The most important of Prempeh's new multifocal outlook was his interest in Western education and Christianity, which will be the most enduring on Asante society. A couple of weeks after his self-reading at Asafu, he requested for a meeting with some immediate members of the ruling Oyoko clan. 41 of them attended. It was principally about their welfare and the additions made. Grandmothers and mothers went with the younger ones, and they were all introduced. Prempeh singled out two. The first was Edward Owusu, son of his sister, Kuabakma, and thus his nephew. Kuabakma was the first royal to have unexpectedly died in Kumasi during the exile. The other was the son of a queer Echam called Berima Kweku Edusei. Prempeh made it clear to some elders of Kumasi that the two would succeed him as Asantehene. This came to pass. Edward Owusu as Osagyemang Prempeh II or Osei Twitwi, and Berima Kweku Edusei as Opokuwari II. Edward Owusu had an interest in entrepreneurship instead of formal education, and his uncle supported him. As for Berima Kweku Edusei, days after the historic meeting, Prempeh personally took him to enroll at what is now the St. Cyprian Primary School at Fantini Town, and left him in the care of the Anglican fathers. At some point, Edusei lived with them at the Church of England Mission House. Prempeh ensured the Christian growth of his successors, and it was clear that his interest was not an alibi for his early return from exile. The Harvard University historian Emmanuel Kokwe Champon once wrote that in need of spiritual explanation, Nana Prempeh was eager to learn about Christianity. Their conversion must have been powerful, for in converting, Prempeh was expressing allegiance to the Queen of England, as well as submitting to the religious oversight of the Archbishop of Canterbury. For many years, I found this as an extent truth. My conclusion later on was that it was more of his public policy decisions and the effect of his succession plan which eventually manifested, possibly in the Champon's conclusion. Many Ashantis were encouraged to go to Addis Ababa College, Cape Coast, until Prempeh College was established. Prempeh's children and other returnees from the Seychelles, who later led the independence from the Diocese of Accra in 1973. The future Opokuwari II, we must remember, was a servant of the sanctuary. He took over church leadership for over 3 decades as chancellors, registrars, wardens, and in a way created a synod structure linked to Manhyia. Submission to the Archbishop of Canterbury in Kent became one to the King of Asante in Manhyia. However, better relationships developed on bilateral frontiers. In 2023, the recently resigned Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, presented to Otumfuo Osei Tutu II the highest honor of the Anglican Communion, the Cross of St. Augustine, or the Lambert Award, Manhyia. It was for his and predecessors' significant contribution to the growth of the Anglican Communion. The last monarch to receive this before him was the late Queen Elizabeth II in 2022. Earlier in 2015, Roland Williams, the 104th Archbishop of Canterbury, St. Augustine, and one of the world's leading theologians at Magdalen College, the University of Cambridge, will select Osei Tutu II to be guest speaker on history and Archaeology at his college. This was at an event honoring Nelson Mandela. Christian values had a deep influence on the chosen successors. According to his biographer and collaborator, Alex Appiah, when Prempeh II was asked of the secret behind his success as a king for 39 years, the longest since the establishment of the kingdom, he mentioned his Bible, which he had kept from the day of his installment as ASANTE. The 83-year-old Bible is here at the Manhyia Palace Museum. Chemartin wrote, "This is now reduced to a threadbare of a Bible, apparently through its constant use. His devotion and deep trust in God are sometimes frightening." When Prempeh I died, the 13-year Opokuwai II wept bitterly at the church service at St. Cyprian. He told his biographer, the British historian Ivor Wells, in the 1970s, that he lost a mentor and a carer, and he spoke emotionally, according to Wells, of those who had helped him but who have now departed this life. Beside Prempeh I, they included Father Carlton of London and his mother, the Appiah in Kumasi. Later, Opokuwai II would travel to England to pursue law instead of his choice of local government. As you may be aware, one of the district commissioners of Asante, in dispatches to London, wrote that litigation is beloved by Ashantis. Obviously, a royal lawyer would be more exotic in a courtroom situation. And so he went to England with the assistance of Prempeh II, the Kumasi Traditional Council, and the British Council. On his first Sunday in England, he served at the altar of the Church of St. Mary's, Martha, now part of the lower end of the London Bridge, built in the second half of the 1600s. The respected newspaper, Church Times of London, which reported this, described him as a royal server and heir presumptive to the Ashanti Kingdom. By these developments, Prempeh I had completely changed the faith policy of the Ashanti monarchy after almost 200 years. His great predecessors, Ashanti's Osebonsu, in the 1810s, followed by Kwaku Diapeni and Mensah Bonsu, had weathered off Christian influences. They argued that there was nothing wrong with the faith, since it was one God worshipped in different ways. The caveat, however, was that Asante traditions would not be subverted for the style of the other. This explains why, in 1869, the head of the Basel mission of the Presbyterian Church, Ramsiam, was imprisoned in Kumasi for 5 years. It was the same argument that the Buganda Kingdom of Uganda made around 1887. People could convert to Christianity, but not at the expense of traditional values. It was when the Catholic Church did exactly that, using the courtiers in the palace as tools of rebellion, that the Kabaka had all the convicts killed in the famous story of the Maltans of Uganda. The questions worth asking, for which I do not have all the answers, are: why was Prempeh I in such a hurry with his succession plan? Did he know his days on the throne of his ancestors would not be long? Whatever they were, that plan, whether by premonition or strategic thinking, has been the most sustainable of peaceful successions in the last 100 years. Beside this was an economic management plan for the future. Until his death, only 7 years after his return, he did not have access to the wealth of his kingdom, as the prime lands and other ancestral resources, natural resources as well, had been registered in the name of the British Crown. The two things he relied on were the pride of a people and a hopeful succession. In the end, they worked. Prempeh I was also the first to set up a modern administrative office of private secretaries, palace planners, state secretaries, and protocol units to complement the changing times. The earliest private secretaries had included the Seychelles-born Boatin brothers, in particular Henry and Paul, who developed compulsory education schemes for the royals and other talented individuals, branded the palace, and also opened the channels for international diplomacy and visitations from Africa and other leaders. These included the visit of the UK Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir Stamford Cripps, to Kumasi. The reign of Agyemang Prempeh II saw fruits of these policies as he added on and created opportunities for greater growth. The leadership shown in the restoration of Asante Confederacy in 1935, as reflected in the papers, and the subsequent negotiation, which in 1941 led to the revestment of the lands in the Golden Stool in the Kumasi Lands Ordinance, will eventually produce some of the revenue that Agyemang Prempeh needed. These monies were invested in educational infrastructure, his association with 23 secondary schools, the eventual University of Science and Technology, and other policies which included the sponsorship of individuals to universities abroad. Many of the Asante SEYCHELLES will later join the public service of Ghana, including public broadcasting, and will head the external French department at the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. They were also cricket commentators for the BBC, and one of them, as the Watson brothers, Thomas, co-founded the Alliance Française in Ghana and was its president for many years, and another became ambassador. Yet, others went to the judiciary and became justices, and a sizable number joined the bar. In fact, Agyemang Prempeh II recovered enough lost grounds, righting the usurpation of stool lands by non-royals, a situation the British had intentionally created as fodder for colonial control. By the time he was done with some of the major reinstatements, he had enough credibility such that the Chieftaincy Act 1961 at 81 that was passed by the Nkrumah government and which created the National House of Chiefs made him the titular president and for the headquarters to be in his capital, Kumasi. Prempeh II had also realized the changing times and has supported Shemartin and others in setting up the Ashanti Cultural Center, which became the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa, in tangible and intangible preservation. It houses the Prempeh II Museum, whose facilities are still the most elaborate. Nkrumah nationalized it and asked Shemartin to replicate it in the other regions of the country. There were the turbulent times of the dilemma of identity in an emergent Ghana from 1954 to 1957, when Asante sought a federal status. Oko and his producer price had been the immediate cause and had led to the formation of the National Liberation Movement, which was closely related to Manhyia and Prempeh. It was the first, most violent political engagement after the last Anglo-Ashanti War of 1900. It was, however, not in unison, as it was based on partisan political interests. Prempeh II and Asante survived with long-term impact that led to the creation of one of the two major political parties in Ghana. The exile of Prempeh I created such a big dissolution from the 1900s and was of interest to many scholars, the British district commissioners and governors who wrote extensively about it. Virtually all the accounts never gave room for its recovery in a post-colonial situation. The chief commissioner of Asante, Francis Fuller, in a vanished dynasty, came to the conclusion that it was all over in its glory and imperial history. Even within, such pessimism was prevalent. The future Opokuwa II intimated that when he was growing up, the general feeling was that Prempeh I will never return. If there was any hope that he ever gave, it was in his correspondence to the elders of Kumasi. Thankfully, 9 years ago, Otumfuo Osei II authorized these correspondence to be compiled in a collaborative exercise with the Seychelles National Archives, and they are now at this palace. The last of the documents got him 3 days ago. As Prempeh II was getting physically weaker towards the end of his reign, which eventually came and was announced on May 30th, 1970, Opoku II was at the peak of prime of his readiness by a prediction of fate. Prempeh II had groomed him and prevented him from going into banking. According to Wells, Prempeh II personally took him to the town and city council. This was after Opoku had gained some work experience in Takoradi and Nazim in building surveys and land management. He became the Officer of Works and Development in Kumasi. The reign of Opoku II was peaceful and was the beginning of high-flight Asante diplomacy. He befriended other monarchs, which apart from the House of Windsor, included the King of Persia or the Shah of modern-day Iran as a member of the Monarchies League. Of the uproar that greeted J.J. Rawlins's June 4th uprising in 1979 and the 31st December Revolution, he was tactful, and it later paid off as he became the elder of the nation. In a Silver Jubilee conversation that Charles Vekubrube and I published in 1995, titled A Queer Free Year, the wife of Opoku II emphasized this. He told us, when J.J. Rawlins staged his June 4th uprising, he came to Kumasi within that week. There was curfew, and at 1 a.m., soldiers came to our house here, that is in Shaesho, and said Rawlins was at the officers' mess and wanted to see Otumfuo urgently, and that I should take him to Manhyia that early morning. I dressed up, and in the midst of a convoy of armored cars, I went with the soldiers with Rawlins in one of the armored cars to Manhyia Palace. It was 1:30 a.m., that's in the morning, and we woke up the Asante Hima Nana Efiakupi and the other chiefs who sleep in the palace and went to see Otumfuo. Rawlins knelt before Otumfuo and introduced himself, saying he had come to greet him before he would continue with his work. He had decided not to go to sleep that night without seeing him. On Rawlins' second coming on the 31st of December and the start of the revolution, Opoku was instrumental behind the scenes in getting some donor and multilateral support. At his funeral eulogy, Rawlins, on behalf of the state of Ghana, said, I hope that one day the people of this country will know what Opoku did for us. For a declined empire, which had been written off and which Prempeh I had rejuvenated, its influence in national development over a century after exceeded a vanished dynasty. To understand the political leadership of Asante better, and especially from the return of Prempeh I, is to listen to what the nominees say on installment and not who did what. The oath of kinship, using the Mpomponso sword, is the social contract of a continuum, as were the reigns of Agyemang Prempeh II and Opoku II, so is that of whom we have now, Osei Tutu II. In April 1999, he evoked the names of his predecessors and promised to add to what they did, turning the Mpomponso sword towards the cardinal geographies of Kumasi, for the chiefs and people present as eyewitnesses. He swore that I am the grandson of Osei and Opoku. I am the grandson of Nana Bonsu. I am the great-grandnephew of Nana Agyemang Prempeh. Nana Kwame Twitwi Prempeh II was my uncle. Opoku II was my elder brother. If my elder brother Opoku is gone to the village, and by the grace of Asante man, you have given his gun to me to rule. If I don't rule well, if I don't govern the state and protect you as my forefathers did, violate the great oath. One of the challenges that Prempeh I had was to undo what the British had done with non-royals occupying certain stools. This was not of immediate concern though, as some got resolved. He rather abolished certain stools whose relevance posed challenges to evolving modernity. One of them had a semblance in functionality of heir presumptive to the golden stool. As long as there was a reigning Asante, this should not be. If anything, it should only be an unofficial gossip. And that explains why he abolished the Manhyia stool. As he was around for only 7 years, it fell on Agyemang Prempeh II to investigate the right lineage politics. Because he had time, he succeeded to a large extent. He also decided that for the first time, stool histories should be documented for prosperity. And so he charged Joseph Agyemang Duah and Anniv to do that in a 10-year project at the Institute of African Studies, the University of Ghana, which has helped to resolve some of the contemporary cases. If sustainability of the kinship was the forefathers' primary responsibility, Osei Tutu II was also in his oath the Lord Spiritual, whose duty was to protect the sovereign people as his forebears did. He has so far successfully adjudicated over 400 chieftaincy cases with their attendant disputes on the ownership and management of land before 1883. That is, after the Civil War, we've not had this peaceful period for. This has successfully been done, such that major tensions before the last quarter century that led to underdevelopment in communities. I will give 3 more examples of secession that has made Asante stronger from the 1800s, and more particularly yet. When T.E. Bordage visited Asante Osei Bonsu in Kumasi, they discussed the British Museum. Osei Bonsu wanted to do something similar. The British Museum wanted to do something similar. The cost involved was, however, prohibitive, as the stones was about Prempeh II, who wanted to build a museum for Prempeh I in the late 1940s. As it could not be done, and Opoku knew of it, he turned the palace of Prempeh I into this museum at that end, which will be 30 years next year. Now, Osei Tutu II, having given this auditorium, has almost completed the first purposefully built contemporary palace museum in this country. He sat through the partnership agreement in London with Tullow Oil Company and was involved with reviews of designs and secured the initial grant with which the museum was started and added on to it. 2 weeks ago, the Reserve Bank of South Africa gave permission for export of some Asante gold objects of the 19th century. This was through his initial contact with the Anglo Gold Ashanti, which had previously purchased these objects from a Swiss collector of African art. This will be part of his new museum and acquisition. The third example has to do with the looted objects of 1874 and 1897. Prempeh I, on his return, was livid upon learning that among the looted objects was a particular basin used for veneration at the Royal Mausoleum at Manhyia. His disputation with the British Colonial Secretary yielded nothing. While he and others thought the basin was at the British Museum, it has always been lodged at the National Army Museum in South Kensington in London. Prempeh II also requested for the restitution of the looted objects up to the late 1960s. Opoku II did the same. None of these objects, however, came. In the sense that the reign of Osei Tutu II brought 7 from the Fowler Museum in February and 32 from the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum in March, it's a classic condition of affirmation when they swear that they will add to what their predecessors did or could not do. The returned objects led to homecoming, adversity, and commemoration on May 1, 2024. This exhibition is the most visibly powerful statement and event since Prempeh's return. It had a global restitution interest of over 40 million people, with the BBC networks alone registering over 10 million. The ifs of history are detestable contemplations. But if Prempeh I had not returned, what would have happened? This memorial year constitutes a trinity of cultural renewal. 1874, 1924, 2024. Memorialized by his nephew, Agyemang Prempeh II, his grand-nephews, Opokuwai II, or Osei II, who is presiding over this festival. It is under his reign that the government of Ghana, through his advocacy, named an international airport after Prempeh I. It is the making of history that Prempeh, before whose return was so desperate, has become a bicentenary patriarch of the Oyoko dynasty, or in our way, Oyoko PSA. On January 21st, 1918, he wrote that mournful petition. And I cite it here. Consider how wretched I am, for I am being taken prisoner together with father, mother, brother, and chiefs for now 22 years. And now, how miserable to see that father, mother, brother, and nearly 3/4 of the chiefs are dead. The remaining quarter, some are blind, some worn out with old age, and the rest being attacked with diverse diseases. And now, I do not find where to glance and where to go to comfort myself. And my sole hope and comfort is by giving myself wholly to God, by whom all things are possible. Unquote. At this stage, he was a broken man. He had buried his mother, Nana Yecha, who was also the Asante woman. And within 26 days of that, his brother, Agyemang, with whom he did many things. John the Apostle wrote, "We speak of what we know and bear witness to what we have seen." Agyemang Prempeh indeed had testimonies of foreboding. His tribute to the apostle was his Anglican priest son, John, who practiced on the island of Mauritius. Prempeh's many policy reforms, from especially 1926, included lifting the ban placed on him by the British of one man, one wife. He argued that he had a private life, and there was the Ashanti social expectation in that regard. A year before he died, he fulfilled his cardinal wish of bringing the remains of his 22 chief prisoners, whom he had buried in the Seychelles, Kumasi. At the grand funeral he held for them, he told Kumasi and ASANTE man of their loyalty and sacrifices to him, and asked all the families to reinter these remains, which had taken him 5 years to organize and to bring back. The other thing he did 3 months before he died was the rebuilding in a state of despair of the Sacred Royal Mausoleum, Bantama, on March 30th, 1931. The British historian Thomas McCaskey paints the mausoleum as a spiritual group and tells us that the Asante Kwaku on the morning of April 27, 1868, had a spiritual conclave there and came back in sorrow, dying in the night. On that fateful day of May 12, 1931, there was another spiritual conclave of time. Prempeh I had been very ill, but had decided to attend Mass at the St. Cyprian Church. As he could not get out of his car, he listened to the hymns being sung. Later, he called for the wardens and gave them his offering, and went back to his palace. He died later in the day. Drawing down the curtains on this epic 19th century historical drama, of which he was the lead cast or dramatist personnel. We will never know what was on his mind that day, except to say that Cyprian, that volatile bishop of ancient Carthage, now modern day Tunisia, could have been his patron saint. Like him, Prempeh suffered many persecutions. The Anglican Church of St. Cyprian of Kumasi, the historian Emmanuel Champon, has remarked must have held a very special place in his heart to deserve such an agonizing physical and spiritual trip. We must not forget that it was at this same church that he had his official Thanksgiving service on his return from exile in 1929. He took to the service the golden stool and his attendants for protecting him over the years. Prempeh's Christian faith could be for some the antithesis of the Pauline doctrine of one Lord, one faith, one baptism. But then, ancient beliefs and adaptations sometimes come together with historical and cultural antecedents. For instance, major parts of the coronation of King Charles III, as we saw it, were based on the Book of Kings in the Old Testament, including the tunic shirt fashion or dress of the Byzantine or Roman antiquity. The role of Zadok, the priest, anointing Solomon, had its equivalents to the Archbishop of Canterbury taking King Charles through the rituals. The English believed in the Stone of Destiny, which was brought from Scotland and taken to the Westminster Abbey for the coronation service, was not different from Prempeh's golden stool at his Thanksgiving service almost a century ago. Now, 106 years after all this, the last announcement an air traveler hears on final descent into Kumasi is welcome to Prempeh the First International. At other times, the air hostess, with an assumption of your knowledge, says with a smile, welcome to Prempeh. Last, he prevailed and made us empaths of figurative history. The British knew this 9 months before his death, and amazed at Prempeh's resilience to rebuild his kingdom, King George V conferred on him the King's Medal for African Chiefs. This hypocritical gesture could be, in the words of their universal playwright, a situation of all is well that ends well. Again, 100 years after his return, what is the ASANTE Palace has been walled of its 10-kilometer ancient forest. It will not be easy to destroy it as was done to Prempeh's. It is now comparable, if not in its monuments, at least in its attention to the Menelik or the imperial palace of Emperor Haile Selassie in Addis Ababa. We will conclude this address with the Indian Nobel laureate V.S. Naipaul. In his well-known novel, A Bend in the River, are the opening lines. The world is what it is. Men who are nothing, who allow themselves to become nothing, have no place in it. Our secular prophet of old traditions was also our collective nemesis. It is because of that, and whom his charger is today, that our world is one of cultural renaissance. As you join in this renaissance, Your Excellency the President of Seychelles, you are also a participant witness of history, of faith, and adversity, an anthem of the Song of Moses. Over 40 years ago, you baptized two of Prempeh's great-grandchildren who are with us today at the same St. Paul's Cathedral in your capital of Victoria, where Prempeh worshipped. They have traveled with you to be here in communion of one exile, many stories. In the end, Utumfo, and as you remember the past, so will the future remember you.
Tanyini wantena fie ema aseduamfo
blani pie frimantam behin se pin enye nkwande wa na yesotro no wa
ansa na odi asebe fita na no makode ebrensi am wa wotua ne nsem mojabumonim hu bi duanani wie klaman wo ye sofo kra wo nyeye bi
tontonte ye no nsane ye fa
nyansapo
abone ntaka na mane ye kese na ntakra abone de fanyinam kwatere kwa
mada woro ma ntuma ye fe ni din de seyin ni din de obama
akola wa no so pese utrimu usuma ense bratam
ne honhon hia na amerika sa
sabe ka ya twa ni mu nyame nai ebu afa so enye de ya twa ni mu twa